Penelope Starr adjusted the strap of her worn leather bag as she stepped through the towering glass doors of the Whitmore Foundation's private research library. The cool, polished marble floors gleamed under the bright chandeliers, reflecting the crisp designer suits and elegant gowns of the guests milling about. Penelope's modest cardigan and simple skirt made her feel small amidst the swirl of high-status academics and wealthy donors gathered for the afternoon's luncheon. She moved quietly, clutching her clipboard, her soft footsteps barely audible over the murmur of refined conversation. As the Foundation's newest librarian, Penelope's days were filled with cataloging ancient manuscripts and guiding researchers through the carefully preserved collections. She kept her head down, speaking only when spoken to, an unfamiliar presence in this world of privilege and polished manners. The air shifted suddenly when the director of the Foundation cleared his throat at the lectern. "Ladies and gentlemen, I regret to inform you that a confidential letter outlining upcoming grant allocations has been leaked online today," he announced, tension rippling through the room. Gasps and startled whispers followed, eyes darting around the gallery. Then, sharp and firm, the director pointed directly at Penelope. "Security footage confirms Miss Starr was near the printer just before the leak was discovered. We have no choice but to hold her responsible." A hush fell. The murmurs grew into subtle accusations, seasoned with snickers and side glances that pinned Penelope as the culprit. Staff members exchanged uncomfortable looks, some barely masking their disdain. Blinking back tears, Penelope stammered her innocence, but the damage was done. She was quickly escorted out, the weight of shocked stares pressing down as she walked away with a bruised heart and a silent plea that someone, anyone, would believe her. The small apartment Penelope returned to felt colder than usual, its sparse furnishings casting long shadows in the dim evening light. She sank onto the threadbare couch, clutching the strap of her bag as if it anchored her to reality. The events at the Whitmore Foundation swirled relentlessly in her mind, replaying scenes of pointed fingers and accusing gazes. She wanted to scream, to defend herself fiercely, but the words felt trapped, as if swallowed by the very walls around her. Night came, but sleep eluded Penelope. She lay awake, staring at the pale ceiling, the ceiling fan's soft hum offering no comfort. Her stomach churned uneasily. She had no appetite for the simple dinner she usually prepared. Silence wrapped around her, but inside, a storm raged, anger, bewilderment, and the sting of betrayal. How had her life unraveled so quickly, from trusted librarian to public pariah? The next morning brought no relief. She sat at the edge of her bed, sipping lukewarm coffee, her gaze unfocused. Her phone sat beside her, the screen filled with gentle reminders, messages from friends offering condolences, inquiries from temp agencies, and updates on job openings, all highlighting the stark reality that her livelihood was slipping from her hands. The label, "Accused Leak," spread invisibly but fiercely, tarnishing a name she had protected with years of integrity. As the day stretched, moments from Penelope's past punctured the heavy silence. Years ago, a sharp and inquisitive student, Penelope had thrived in the vibrant halls of university, her mind brimming with ideas and ambition. In a sunlit library much like this one, she had traced the faded edges of ancient texts with reverence and delight. But then, life's relentless tide swept in, a sick mother needing constant care, requiring sacrifices that meant shelving her own dreams. The brilliant scholar became the tireless caretaker, her notebooks replaced by prescription schedules and hospital appointments. One evening, with exhaustion etched into the lines of her face, Penelope sat beside her mother's bed, reading softly to offer comfort. Those years taught her resilience and quiet strength but also left her with a sense of settling for less, a life foregone with little fanfare. After her mother's passing, Penelope fought to rebuild her identity. She took on modest jobs at local libraries, finding solace among the stacks but never shaking the feeling that she was an outsider in the world she longed to belong to. The Whitmore Foundation job was a breakthrough, a fragile step toward reclaiming her lost aspirations. She had imagined a place where her meticulousness and love for books could shine without judgment. Now, that fragile hope lay shattered. Her mind recalled the first day at Whitmore, the nervous trembling in her hands as she arranged rare volumes, the careful greetings to dignitaries who barely noticed her presence, the quiet pride of contributing to a venerable institution. She had smiled politely at snooty remarks, endured dismissive glances, and kept moving forward, driven by determination rather than entitlement. Sitting in her apartment, she felt the depth of her fall, not from grandeur but from a dignity she had grasped tightly despite adversity. Her thoughts drifted to the Foundation's guests, the smirks exchanged after she was blamed, the subtle yet sharp tone of those who whispered, "How could someone like her?" as if her social standing dictated her honesty. Penelope's hands clenched in her lap, frustration flickering in her eyes. The world she stepped into was one where appearance often overshadowed truth, where power silenced the quiet and humble. But beneath the bruises lay a core of defiance. She was not broken. She had walked fire to be where she was, and though the flames threatened to consume her, she would not let them. The injustice of it all burned fiercely, but within her, a flicker of resolve began to kindle. Despite the exhaustion, Penelope forced herself to rise from the couch. She moved to her desk cluttered with books and notes, her fingers tracing the edges of a worn journal, a repository of thoughts, reminders of strength, and small victories. She opened it carefully, flipping to a page where she had once written, "Integrity is my quiet armor." A sigh escaped her lips. She was still armored, still herself, even if the world had cast her aside. The day bled into evening, and Penelope sat by the window, watching the city's lights flicker to life. She thought about the linoleum floors of the Foundation's library, the whisper of pages turning, the faint scent of old paper, a world she loved but felt suddenly distant from. The sting of humiliation was sharp, but it could not erase the truth she held. Her phone buzzed softly, a text from a colleague, distant but kind. "If you need anything, I'm here." Penelope read it, warmth briefly touching her chest. The thread connecting her to the world beyond her pain was fragile but not severed. As night deepened, Penelope curled under an old quilt, thoughts swirling between past struggles and uncertain futures. Her lips pressed into a thin line, not defeated, not yet. Tomorrow held no promises, but the strength she had built through years of hardship whispered softly within her, this was not the end. The morning would come, and with it, the fight to reclaim her name. A few days passed in a blurred haze of restless nights and distracted mornings. The walls of her apartment seemed to close in more tightly each day, wrapping Penelope in a silence deeper than words. Yet, amid the fog of self-doubt and shame, a flicker of clarity stirred in an unexpected moment. Replaying the scene in her mind, she remembered overhearing a hushed phone conversation backstage in the library just before the leak was announced. A voice, low and hurried, had mentioned the printer acting up, jammed paper, errors, but the speaker was not the same time as when the leak was discovered. The pieces did not align. That detail gnawed at Penelope with persistent insistence. If the timeline was wrong, and the printer malfunctioned earlier, then she could not have been the one who printed the confidential letter. A surge of cautious hope pushed her toward action. Taking a deep breath, Penelope composed an email to the Foundation's administration, carefully explaining the timeline discrepancy she recalled and requesting a chance to review the printer's activity logs. Her fingers trembled as she typed, aware that any hope of clearing her name hinged on this small technical detail. She pressed send, then waited. The reply came swiftly but coldly. The director's assistant responded, stating the matter had been thoroughly investigated, the decision final, and no further reviews would be conducted. The tone was polite but inflexible. The rejection stung, but Penelope was not deterred. If the official channels closed doors, she would find another way. That evening, she returned to the library under the high glow of moonlight, carrying only a notebook and a determined heart. The building was quieter now, fewer steps echoing down the halls. At the entrance, she encountered Marcus, the night security guard, an older man with watchful eyes, known for his no-nonsense demeanor but a sympathetic ear. "Penelope? Didn't expect to see you here," Marcus remarked, eyebrows raised. "I'm sorry to disturb you," she said softly. "I need to ask a favor. I believe the printer logs might show more than the Foundation realizes. Could you help me access them? Just to check the times and IDs connected." Marcus studied her silently, then nodded slowly. "You've always been a quiet one. But you seem earnest. I'll see what I can do." They moved to the security office, a cramped room filled with monitors and buzzing machines. Marcus tapped keys swiftly, bringing up logs of recent activity. Together, they scrolled through entries, user IDs, timestamps, and printer codes. Penelope's heart pounded as she compared times to what she remembered. The printout of the confidential letter was logged at precisely 2:14 p.m., the time when she was assisting a guest several rooms away. And then the user ID, different from hers. She pointed to the screen. "That's not my code. It belongs to Darcy Halloway," she said, reading the name attached to the access card used to send the print job. Darcy Halloway, the visiting board member who had been present at the luncheon. Penelope's mind reeled. Her elegant competitor, the woman known for charm and subtle power plays, was the last person she would have expected to slip in such a costly misstep, if indeed she had. Marcus leaned back, whistling lightly. "Well, that's telling. You better get this where it matters." Penelope nodded, clutching the notebook where she jotted down the key details, the times, the usernames. She thanked Marcus sincerely and left the library, the night air cool against her flushed face, charged with a mixture of relief and adrenaline. The next morning, she called the Foundation's office, asking for a meeting with the director and the administration team. Her voice was steady but polite as she explained she had uncovered new information regarding the printer logs that might exonerate her. "Penelope, as we've said, the decision is final," came a familiar voice, firm with bureaucratic finality. "I understand, sir. But I have the print records showing that the printout linked to the leak was made with someone else's access card. I believe this evidence can clear my name," Penelope insisted, trying to keep frustration out of her tone. There was silence on the other side of the line. Then the director spoke carefully. "You realize this is a serious accusation against a board member. Without formal channels and protocols, we cannot simply act on your private findings." Penelope swallowed her disappointment but refused to back down. "Please, I only want a chance to discuss this in person. There is proof, I can show it." After a tense pause, the director relented, scheduling a brief meeting the same afternoon, though caution tinged his words. At the Foundation, Penelope arrived early, clutching the printed logs and a copy of the digital files on a USB drive. The grand hall was filled with hushed conversations and the shimmering presence of donors, board members, and staff. Her eyes briefly met Marcus, who gave her a nod of encouragement. In the meeting room, the director, flanked by his assistant and the head of security, listened as Penelope laid out the data clearly, showing timelines, names, and the critical discrepancy highlighting Darcy Halloway's role. The director frowned. "If this is accurate, that would indeed complicate matters. But how did you obtain these logs?" Penelope explained her conversation with Marcus, omitting no detail yet maintaining respect for protocol. The assistants exchanged wary glances. The director sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "We will review this internally. I cannot promise immediate action." As the meeting ended, Penelope felt a mix of vindication and lingering frustration. While the evidence was undeniable, bureaucracy's slow gears threatened to bury the truth beneath caution and politics. Refusing to accept stalling, she turned her attention outward. First, she checked social media and online chatter about the foundation. A few posts hinted at unrest and speculation about the leak but veiled any direct claims. Penelope then visited a local cafe frequented by some foundation staff. She discreetly spoke with a few kind souls, asking about malaise or rumors. One barista mentioned overhearing that Darcy had been uneasy recently, distracted by what sounded like mounting pressure from the board. The puzzle pieces fitted together. With this growing patchwork of information, Penelope felt the tide turning. She was no longer the powerless victim but a quiet force building momentum. That night, she reviewed every detail once again, organizing her notes, ensuring her facts were irrefutable. The path ahead would require courage, but now she had the truth and the resolve to see it through. As she closed her notebook, a spark flickered in her eyes, a determination to reclaim her name, not through anger or public outburst, but through steady, undeniable fact. The quiet librarian was ready to be heard. The air in the grand ballroom of the Whitmore Foundation crackled with anticipation as guests in their finest attire mingled beneath glittering chandeliers. It was the night of the Foundation's annual gala, a gathering designed to celebrate achievements, foster connections, and secure future support from benefactors. Penelope Starr stood quietly beside the entrance, the soft rustle of her simple dress barely audible over the familiar murmur of voices. This was not the world she had dreamed of belonging to, but tonight, it was the stage where she would confront the injustice that had marred her life. Clutching a carefully prepared folder containing the printer logs and supporting notes, Penelope's heart beat steadily. She had rehearsed her approach countless times in the solitude of her apartment, steeling herself against the nervous tremors that fluttered in her stomach. In this crowd of polished cynicism and polished smiles, she was the modest librarian, the woman once disgraced. But now, armed with undeniable proof, she was determined to reclaim her dignity. As the evening unfolded, Penelope navigated through the clusters of guests. Heads turned, some with surprise, others with curiosity. Whispers floated, but this time, they carried a different tone, intrigued by the woman who had been wronged and might finally be on the cusp of vindication. She spotted Marcus, the night security guard who had aided her weeks ago. His nod was subtle but filled with encouragement. Drawing strength from his quiet support, Penelope approached a small group near the center, a mix of Foundation staff, a few board members, and notable donors. Among them was Darcy Halloway, the elegant and poised board member linked to the printer logs. Penelope's gaze met Darcy's for a moment, the flicker of recognition and unease there was unmistakable. With calm resolve, Penelope addressed the group. "I want to thank you all for your time tonight. There's something important I need to share, a matter that affects not only my own reputation but the integrity of this foundation." She held up the folder. "I have reviewed the printer logs related to the recent leak and found conclusive evidence that the confidential letter was printed using Miss Halloway's access card, not mine." The crowd shifted, surprised murmurs spreading like a ripple across the room. Some guests exchanged wary glances, others leaned in, eyes fixed on the unfolding revelation. Darcy's expression tightened. A flicker of panic shadowed her features, though her tone was measured as she replied, "Penelope, are you certain of these claims? Making such accusations at a public event is serious." Penelope nodded steadily. "I have the logs here." She passed the folder around. "I understand the severity. But I am exposing only what the data reveals. I was wrongly accused, humiliated, and dismissed without cause. This foundation deserves transparency, and so do all of you." A notable donor, his brow furrowed in concern, stepped forward. If these records are authentic, why was this evidence not considered before? The director of the foundation was nearby, having been drawn into the conversation by the growing attention. His face was guarded, lips pressed into a firm line. The situation is complex, he began carefully. We strive for accuracy in all matters. If new evidence has come to light, it will be reviewed. Another board member spoke up, her gaze sharp. Transparency is paramount. We demand a full clarification. As pressure mounted, Darcy's composure faltered faintly. She glanced sideways, seeking allies among the guests, but found only skeptical eyes and polite distance. The crowd's sympathy was palpably shifting toward Penelope. Penelope's voice grew stronger. I've been dedicated to this foundation's mission for months and have only sought to support its goals. To be falsely accused and cast out without investigation was devastating. Tonight, I ask for accountability, for truth to shape our path forward. Murmurs of agreement echoed. Some guests nodded, others whispered agreements. The atmosphere thickened with tension, the power dynamics shifted. The director finally cleared his throat. It appears this matter cannot remain unanswered. He looked briefly at Darcy, then back to the crowd. An internal review will commence immediately, and pending results, appropriate action will follow. Darcy, face pale but voice steady, responded, I welcome any investigation to clear my name. But the flicker of hesitation betrayed her words. Others sensed the cracks forming beneath her polished facade. The gathering slowly dispersed, but not without visiting Penelope with quiet nods of respect and words of encouragement. The whispers now told a different story. The quiet librarian was no longer invisible. Later, as Penelope stepped outside beneath a sky dimmed by distant city lights, the cool night air brushed against her cheeks. She inhaled deeply, the weight of months pressing upon her starting to lift. She had spoken her truth and the world had listened. Her hands still trembled, not from fear, but from the profound release of standing tall in a place that once tried to cast her down. The journey ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, Penelope felt a flicker of hope strong enough to endure whatever came next. As she walked away from the gala, the sounds of champagne glasses and laughter fading behind her, a quiet smile touched her lips. Tonight, she reclaimed not only her name but the respect that had been denied for too long. The days that followed the gala unfolded with a steady momentum as the Whitmore Foundation's internal review moved swiftly under the weight of undeniable evidence. Penelope Starr's quiet defiance and unyielding pursuit of the truth catalyzed a shift within the Foundation's polished walls, one that few had anticipated but many would now remember. The board convened with seriousness, poring over the printer logs, digital files, and statements. The proof of Darcy Halloway's culpability was unambiguous. The very access card Darcy had used to print the confidential letter linked her directly to the leak that had disrupted the Foundation's delicate operations. The questions swirling beneath Darcy's composed exterior escalated into sharp scrutiny. The Foundation's director, who had appeared wary earlier, now addressed the board with a tone edged in resolution. Given the magnitude of this breach and the damage caused by the false accusation, we must respond decisively. Within 4 days of the gala, the Foundation released a statement. Darcy Halloway was suspended immediately pending deeper inquiry and relieved of her board duties. Financial penalties and reputational repercussions loomed as the Foundation worked to mend the rift caused by her actions. For Penelope, the turn of events was surreal but deeply affirming. She received an official letter from the Foundation's administration, acknowledging the error in judgment and offering a formal apology for the unwarranted accusations and public humiliation she had endured. More importantly, the letter extended an invitation to return to the Foundation, not only restored to her former position but promoted to assistant curator of rare collections, a role reflecting her expertise and dedication. The news spread quickly amongst Penelope's acquaintances. her story transitioning from one shrouded in pity to one colored by respect and genuine accomplishment. The promotion was more than a job title, it was validation of years of sacrifice and unwavering integrity. The day she returned to the Whitmore Foundation, the atmosphere that had once felt unwelcoming was tinged with a newfound warmth. Colleagues greeted her with sincere smiles, some offered quiet congratulations, and Marcus, the night guard whose assistance had proved invaluable, nodded proudly as their eyes met. The director approached her cautiously, laden with a hint of awkwardness tempered by professionalism. "Penelope, on behalf of the Foundation, I want to express our regret for what you endured. We hope you will accept this new role as a sign of our commitment to integrity and respect." Penelope met his gaze steadily. "Thank you for the apology. The experience was difficult, but I am grateful the truth came to light. I accept the role with the hope it reflects a fresh start, not just for me, but for how this foundation values its people." As she settled into her updated office, surrounded by the rare volumes she cherished, Penelope felt a sense of peace wending through her spirit. The quiet dignity she had maintained through hardship was no longer overshadowed by unjust suspicion. Weeks later, at a small celebratory gathering hosted by Foundation staff to welcome her back, Penelope stood among friends and colleagues who had come to admire her perseverance. The glittering world that once seemed impenetrable now felt more like a community, complex but capable of growth. A local newspaper caught wind of Penelope's story, publishing a profile that celebrated her resilience and dedication. The piece highlighted her journey from hardship to redemption, a poignant reminder that truth and integrity could prevail even when overshadowed by prejudice. Penelope read the article with a gentle smile, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. The once quiet and modest librarian was no longer invisible. She belonged, not because she conformed to expectations, but because she remained true to herself. One afternoon, while shelving a delicate manuscript, Penelope paused and looked out the library's tall windows. Sunlight filtered through, casting a golden glow over the rows of ancient books, their stories preserved by hands like hers. The halls echoed softly with footsteps and whispered conversations, no longer daunting but familiar. Her heart swelled with quiet pride. The false accusation, the humiliation, the struggle, they all marked a chapter she had closed with grace. Penelope had reclaimed not only her place but the respect that came from standing firm in the face of adversity. With steady steps and an unshakable spirit, she moved forward, no longer just a simple librarian, but a respected guardian of knowledge and a living example that resilience and truth endure beyond the shadows of doubt. As Penelope exited the building one afternoon, colleagues passed with nods of acknowledgement, smiles flickering amid the polished surroundings. Her head held high, she walked into the bright day, carrying the quiet strength that had always been hers beneath the surface. The world had judged her once, but now, they saw her clearly, honored, valued, and undeniably worthy.